Okay, hi, it's me again. I just kind of wanted to not do something different because I only have 3 videos on my YouTube channel. But I kind of wanted to film like a video essay. I've been watching a lot of ContraPoints and other, video essay channels on various topics from, video games to, ContraPoints does this thing that I love. She, chooses not obscure topics but just very specific topics and then manages to break them down like they're like a topic that can be taught as a whole class, and it's really cool. Anyway, I've just been feeling really inspired by various video essay creators to make my first video essay, if you can call it that. Because I've never done this before, but my topic that I'm going to be choosing today is a little bit basic. It's been, done many times before, but I figured, hey, this is my first one. Why don't I do something that everyone has an idea on, so I don't have to do as much work, I guess. Not really. Excuse me, but yeah, just so I can feel a little bit more eased into the idea of making a video essay. So that topic will be the Salem witch trials, more specifically how the trials affected feminism in modern day. So first, going over the history of the witch trials. Okay, so the witch trials, were very, very unfair and unjust, and they took place during an era where Puritan culture was strong, and paranoia was very intense due to demonic entity stories and other things like that. But those paranoias were only more influenced and more stoked, I guess, by the witch trials. The story everyone tells is like, oh, these witches, these women, and I know that there were men in the mix, but definitely not as much as the women that were accused of witchcraft. That these people were servants of the devil, and then they had, familiars and would hex the village they were born in, and if they were in a village, they were there to consume everyone's souls, and stuff like that. And that idea has become for lack of a better word, reclaimed by women, but we'll get there in a minute. So and then so the accusing witches, people accusing witches stemmed from people in government at the time, which were men, accusing women of witchcraft to hide the knowledge they knew about the government and how they ran things. And then that, kind of started more paranoia where people, sorry for itching my nose, where people were like, well, if there's one witch in the village, there's gotta be more, witches travel in a coven, stuff like that. And that caused mass hysteria and mass paranoia. And that later evolved into, people being like, well, if my neighbor upsets me, I can accuse her of witchcraft, and she will probably not survive the trials, so yeah, I win in that argument. And it just kind of turned into like an argument winner, I guess, of like a score settler between two opposing people or two opposing parties. And then, that there was also the aspect of, if a man were to proposition a woman during that time and she declined his offer, he could accuse her of witchcraft, being like, well, yeah, no, I'm salty, I have an ego, so you're a witch, man with an ego, especially during that time. Anyway, So then she would presumably be killed. And then if a woman were to proposition a man and he, you know, didn't, declined her offer as well, he could be like, you tried to seduce me because you're a witch. So, yeah. And then witch trial for her. So it was really just made to keep women down, the trials, and that's what it boils down to, is it was made as a tool to keep the less powerful, more specifically less powerful women, um, down at the time, which is obviously horrible. And after years and years, and years, the idea of a witch, was like, oh, that was just result of people being paranoid, olden times, the kind of, dark magic craze was then like, we can, probably use these monsters, that are witches to profit, because that concept is cool. So then, witches were introduced into media as villains, and with them being introduced, as, monsters and villains, the watered down version for kids naturally came along, witches started being used in storybooks, etc., etc. And then that kind of led to witches being used in movies, and stuff like that. And, the depiction of witches in movies, obviously made to be cool. So then in modern day, women were kind of like, you know what? Being a witch is cool. It's being in tune with nature. It's being in tune with your body, being one with energy, which, is cool. That's great. But, and then, yeah, so then then the idea of a witch as a villain kind of turned into the idea of a witch as the protagonist. Antagonist to protagonist. The witches were the main characters. The witches were what people wanted to be. And, Harry Potter came along and American Horror Story came along. But one thing I noticed is that it was the stories of white women witches that were brought to the media. The story of women of color during the witch trials was just ignored. Or, ignored. And, if they were told, it was strictly historical, in my experience. Strictly historical, no, glamorization, no anything, no, like, modern media spin, just how it was, if it was even told at all. And then I was watching American Horror Story Coven the other day, which is one of my favorite American Horror Story seasons, and the character of Fiona Good, the Supreme Witch, there was a scene where she was talking to Marie Laveau in Marie's hair salon, sorry, and they were talking, and, Fiona was talking about how, or no, Marie kind of brought up the history of magic and how it was a black woman who kind of introduced the idea of magic to white women during, the Puritan era. And then Fiona was like, I didn't get my magic from, an enslaved girl, and just things, kind of rancid like that, and that kind of, I get the point of that is to show her ignorance as a character, but there's people that, think like Fiona in terms of witchcraft and power and stuff, and it's like, it's just kind of like, and obviously, voodoo is a very sacred thing, but, white women definitely do have a prejudice against POC women who practice magic is like, oh, so it's voodoo or something like that. And, you know, nothing wrong with voodoo. Voodoo is great. Voodoo is sacred. But, you know, not all POC women who practice magic practice voodoo. And that's just... And then when... A lot of times when voodoo is depicted, it's depicted as demonic and scary and something so bizarre and dangerous. And I'm not saying that... sorry. I'm not saying that witchcraft isn't... You know, doesn't have scary moments, but a lot of the time it's depicted as magical and like unfamiliar curiosities to be explored, you know. It's very like, you know, there's a very, very fine line between what the media depicts as voodoo and what the media depicts as witchcraft. Yeah, so that's just another thing. It's like women, you know, reclaim the idea of witchcraft, reclaim the idea of women practicing magic and it not being demonic, but seemingly only for white women. I mean, yeah, if you have anything to add to that topic, you know, sound off in the comments below. But, you know, and then kind of in modern day, kind of going to my next topic, modern day, you know, women kind of, you know, they protest and say, you know, we're the daughters or the granddaughters of the witches you didn't burn, and people make fun of that. People are like, okay, that gives very millennial who lives their life based off of their Harry Potter house result on the BuzzFeed quiz, you know. But if you think about it, is it like, are you guys mad at the saying, or are you guys mad at the fact that it's a woman protesting? You know, it's like, yeah, that saying is a little silly, and yes, it's mostly millennial women who protest, you know, using that saying, or the, you know, granddaughters of the witches you didn't burn, but so, like, that's the slogan of, one of the slogans of that movement. So I think that y'all are just kind of mad that it's a woman protesting. You know, because if you think about it, if men were killed in brutal ways by being hung, burned at the stake during that time, and men got together and were like, we are the grandsons of the witches you didn't burn, people would be like, yeah, you are. Like, go get him, tiger. You know? Like, and I don't think the stereotype of, you know, an English teacher who would do anything for Shakespeare would be connected to that movement if it was primarily men in the movement. You know? So, yeah. To kind of finish off my first video essay, I believe that the idea of witches is a very interesting, very multi-layered, multifaceted idea that kind of seems overplayed, but if you kind of apply it to politics and apply it to, you know, just the social climate of this current era, there's a lot that people, you know, can discover. And I'm not saying, I'm not being like, my mind, you know, I'm on top of this, I just introduced you guys to so many new ideas. But it's like, you know, I don't know, it's just like a very interesting concept, and I just felt like I had some share-worthy things. Keep in mind, this is my first video essay. I barely had a script. And I hope that what I said wasn't stupid, and if it was, I sincerely apologize. But yeah, so yeah, let me know what you guys think. Just tell me your own opinions in the comments below, or if your friend messaged me, you know. Yeah, thanks.